Hello and welcome to Seattle Movies Daily, the podcast coming to you weekly about everything you need to know about Seattle movies, from reviews to interviews to just general discussions about everything going on in the city. This week, even as the Odyssey is the biggest game in town, we're welcoming Danish auteur and bona fide weirdo Nicholas Winding Refn back to the big screen after a 10-year hiatus spent making some truly strange TV that I have watched all of because I have a problem. Joining me today, once again, is Liam, who has not seen those shows, but has seen a lot of Refn. Liam, thank you so much for coming here to talk Refn. What is your relationship with this filmmaker?
I mean, not as deep as yours, bud, because I said to you, okay, I'm not going to be able to see Her Private Hell before we have this conversation. I didn't go to the Cannes Film Festival, and I couldn't get in a screening with you this weekend. But I was like, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and watch an episode of Too Old to Die Young. And I ran out of time. Long story short, I saw that most of those episodes were like an hour and 37 minutes long. And I was like, this is not happening. So I'm channeling my memory of watching about an episode and a half of Copenhagen Cowboy.
That might be more instructive to this one, because a lot of the creative folks with that one came to this one, especially the cinematographer.
Right. Besides that, though, I've seen, I think, every one of Winding Refn's features except maybe Pusher 3 and Fear X. I definitely had a Winding Refn period, as all dudes of my ilk do.
I believe he might have come here for Pusher to Seattle at one point in time, which we'll get to. But for folks that don't know anything about Refn, he was the director of Drive, which was the Ryan Gosling heist movie that kind of ends up becoming not really about that when things go awry and just becomes a meditation on violence. That was his last, I would say, moderately accessible movie.
That was his last movie that anyone beyond sickos really cared about.
After that, it was Only God Forgives, The Neon Demon, and then he pivoted to television, Too Old to Die Young, Copenhagen Cowboy, and now we have arrived at Her Private Hell, which is opening at SIFF this week, or excuse me, is opening at the
bunch of AMCs,
Bellevue. But then the Grand Illusion is doing a couple pop-up screenings.
I'm going to try to get to one of those.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that before Drive, which is really his most accessible, normal movie, he directed Valhalla Rising, which is like a real weird movie, and Bronson, which I feel like got some attention, but mostly for Tom Hardy. He kind of... did he introduce Tom Hardy to the American filmmaking landscape? Maybe a little bit.
I think for some folks, yeah. And we talked a little bit about like where he kind of views these all connecting and fitting together. I've been alluding to it a couple times. I spoke to Refn just a short while ago, which was a very fascinating experience, and we touched on a whole lot. But this new film feels like the most uncompromising him, to where if you have not liked the stuff that he is doing, you are not going to like this movie. And I say that positively, because everyone I've talked to have been like, this is for the Refn heads only. This is the real clear in the room. Are you on board with what his entire ethos is or not?
Sign me up. What do you think that ethos is, Chase?
We talked a lot about he enjoys making things that are about artificiality. Even in Drive, that's like more straightforward. It's about a stunt driver who lives in this fictional world, but then also does real jobs as a getaway driver, and those lines kind of blurring, like at the end he wears the mask. This is that, but with almost like no real story, although there is kind of a thing about a missing father, a missing daughter. That's kind of a recurring theme throughout it. He said the first thing he asked Sophie Thatcher is, what is your relationship to your father and what music do you listen to? And that kind of sums up what the thing is. It's a very stylized, very violent at times. I thought very darkly funny. Yeah. But again, only if you're like locked in on what he's doing. Like, this is a polarizing movie that many, many people just had no patience for.
So if I were to describe Refn's post-Drive output, Or let me go back. He
Yeah.
has said that he's a huge William Friedkin fan. He called Friedkin a god, I think. And Friedkin was like, go fuck yourself. And so you can see in his early films, like the Pusher films, this kind of like following people around with a camera, what's often glibly described as like a verite style. I think that's very silly, especially when you think about his style. But, you know, Live and Die in LA has that a little bit. So he said that. But everything post, let's say, Drive, it has a couple characteristics. Glacially paced, meaning they're slow. They have a lot of long takes to go with that. So the takes are long and slow. Hideously violent.
Oftentimes, yes.
And in the case of Only God Forgives, which just a quick story, I saw that with my buddy Chris, who Her Private Hell will be the first feature of his that I have not seen with Chris in 13 years because Chris lives in LA. I remember going to see that, and he had this friend who he'd been photographing tag along, and she was like, yeah, I'll go. And she sat there the whole time, half on her phone, and was just kept being like, you guys are fucking sickos. Why did you bring me to this movie? And Neon Demon kind of introduces this, and he brought this up in your interview with him, this sort of like female kind of perspective that he's interested in his movies that seems to have carried on to Her Private Hell.
Which I think is something that could be subject to, and I think is valuable to, rigorous kind of interrogation and reflection and criticism.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I mean, it's sort of a conversation of, especially with Neon Demon, where it was about fashion and about models and about the exploitative nature of that. How much does the film indulge in that itself? That's something to reflect on. I don't think depiction is endorsement, but you have to really like open your mind to, I think, if he's going to be doing these sometimes very lurid, intentionally so, violent, sexually charged provocations, people are going to have reactions and responses to that. And I think that that's a valuable thing to do. But I'm glad to see, and we can get to this in the next part, I'm glad to see a movie that will open up that dialogue and have it be something that is not sort of just like very explicit about what it's trying to do, where there's sort of a shared, like, we all know what this is, we all agree mostly with like the intention, whereas in this there is a tension about what the intention is. How much of this is meant to be taken seriously? How much of this is almost a satire of the film industry, because it kind of is about a making of a movie, which Sophie Thatcher's character says at one point of, this movie is going to be hell, which I thought was a very funny line, and the exasperated way she says it at the beginning. It's one of those movies that even me describing it is insufficient to what the experience is. That's what I would say, because I watched it again to talk with him and refresh my memory, and it's a lot. That's all I'll say.
So I have not seen the movie yet, as we discussed. I'm excited to see it, but I think there's two things worth bringing up here. One is that he's a little puckish. Like, he's a little bit of like a sprite who wants to, or a nymph who wants to like be provocative. Like, that's kind of, you can't tell. So when you listen to him talk, or you talk to him, he's very slow in the way he speaks. He is Danish by birth, raised partially in New York City. So he has this sort of deep way of speaking, and he sort of sounds like the smartest bro you've maybe ever met in your life. And I would say that there are 3 to 4 Danish filmmakers in the past 30 years who have become significant on the international scene. Suzanne Bier, Refn himself, and of course, Lars von Trier, whose longtime editor is Anders Refn, who is Nicholas's father. And they've had like a sort of funny back and forth in the press. But I bring all that up to say that, like, he wants you paying attention a little bit to his intention and the fact that the intention is being called into question. I don't think this is a guy who wants to tell you what his movies are about.
No. And we bumped up against that a couple times.
Did you? Yeah, when you were chatting on the call.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that also, like, he might be entering a little bit of a for better or for worse late age Von Trier bit, where he's kind of like pushing he's always pushed buttons, but the centering of female characters in the main story is a Von Trier, controversially and provocatively a Von Trier trope in that he, with every film he makes, is often accused of being either a feminist or a misogynist, depending on who you ask.
Yeah. Is it a reflection of the misogyny of the world, or does it indulge in that misogyny itself a little bit?
Yeah, very famously, in an interview with the AV Club many years ago, Chantal Akerman said that Lars von Trier was the only guy doing interesting parts for women. Another artist who is known for saying provocative things. So, yeah, but he also kind of like is a genre guy and makes weird genre movies. And like, I did not recall loving The Neon Demon. I have not revisited it since seeing it initially, but I kind of was like, okay, I'm a little exhausted by this. And I actually intended to check out some of these streaming shows, and I did check out Copenhagen Cowboy, but it didn't give me like frankly a compelling reason to keep it on.
I think Copenhagen Cowboy gets better as it goes along.
Does it? Okay.
I'm on record as being a fan of that. The interesting thing is I would say that Neon Demon is probably also one of the more instructive ones for this. But again, Neon Demon, I think, has like a little bit more narrative scaffolding, whereas this is set in a sort of futuristic sci-fi world with a fog that is around and sort of this Giallo-esque killer that's on the roaming. And like, I haven't even mentioned that Charles Melton is in it and is Private K, this sort of like hyper-masculine, violent Avenger trying to save his daughter by going into hell. It's a lot and kind of chaotic in a way that I found captivating, but some other people might find to be a car crash.
Yeah, I was wondering, will general audiences take to this, which is something maybe we could discuss in our next
Yeah,
segment.
I was going to say, that's a good opportunity to say like where this will fit in with Seattle movie going. But for now, I would say if you like his previous films, this will be something that you are maybe more susceptible to at least opening your mind to. But if it's not something that you're wanting to engage with, it's not going to be for you.
Let's take a quick break, and then we can talk about how this movie's going to fare against the other summer movies that are out right now. Hey, everybody. Hope you're enjoying our conversation about Nicholas Winding Refn. If you want to hear the rest of it, you need to sign up for Seattle Movies Daily. That's seattlemoviesdaily.beehive.com. See you there.